As the head of environmental health and safety, I shouldn't be putting my hand in that elevator. So let's just wait for the next one.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Colbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier.
Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Colbert. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest. He brings a long history of impressive positions and experience. So without further ado, he's a visionary leader whose extensive experience in the facilities field is instrumental in shaping the physical infrastructure and workplace strategies of major global organizations. Before landing his current position, he dedicated 13 years to Merck, where he impressively led their global workforce and enterprise services organization. Prior to that, he honed his operational and leadership skills for 12 years at Stepan, notably serving as plant manager for their Maywood, New Jersey facility. Furthermore, his leadership extends into the broader professional community. He has a distinguished record of service, having been a past president for the New Jersey CoreNet chapter. He also generously contributed his insights and expertise as a member of the board of directors for the New Jersey Chemistry Council, underscoring his commitment to advancing his field and supporting his peers. He currently serves as the Senior Vice President, Global Real Estate, Facilities, and EH&S at Oracle. Don Watson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. It's great to be here, and looking forward to our discussion today. Much appreciated for that great introduction also.
Absolute. Just reading all about you. That's it. Thanks for investing your time with us today, Don. So with everything said in the intro, what's been your biggest lesson learned?
I think, my biggest lesson learned, and, I'll take this back to a mentor, someone who gave me leadership guidance. Even with all the talk about AI and everything else, the real estate facilities profession, and honestly, I would probably say this still probably is true for a lot of other professions too. It's people. You and I are interacting here today. I've been interacting with people throughout the various calls and meetings I've had, today, yesterday, the day before that. And if I kind of reflect on, now what is, probably it's a 30 plus year career across, the chemical industry, across the pharmaceutical industry, and now within kind of the information kind of tech field, that connection to people and that guidance that mentor gave me, it holds true kind of going from when I was, a new graduate in my first job all the way to what I'm doing today. And that would be kind of what I would say is that, at the end of the day, it's going to be it's a person, then it's people, and then you're back to people. And then if you probably circle back for something else, there's going to be another person involved in that people discussion. So that's kind of what I would say has been one of my, big lessons learned throughout the entirety of my career.
It's a great topic. It's not uncommon either, of course. We can't get it done without those around us, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Outstanding.
And even now, even working with your colleagues in different lines of businesses to understand their business strategies. And, if you kind of take that comment to just even thinking about how facilities management are delivered and the power that facilities can play in the role of an organization, whether it's helping human resources with recruiting in terms of how you present your facilities when people come in. It's the first thing that customers see when they come in to visit, within Oracle, or they're with our sales organization or our development organization. The first vision, the first thing they're really seeing of Oracle is when they walk into a lobby. And so I think, all of those things kind of, you get a good feel for those things by talking to, different parts of your organization and to the folks who are coming in and using the facility to really kind of see what clicks with them. And again, the only way to do that is to interact.
Agreed. And speaking of lobbies, specifically Oracle's, we're about, I'd say 20 minutes from your Burlington, Mass location. And from what I remember, It's a very impressive, almost atrium style entrance with plants, and I think there's a juice bar. It's impressive, very
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah, it's a very nice one. If you were to visit our Austin, Texas office, though, you would find a replica of the Oracle Red Bull race car sitting in that lobby. So that
Oh,
lobby
so
probably
cool.
that one probably has it beat a little bit. That's a very popular feature for people who visit the Oracle Austin campus.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have to look that up. So on spot on to the note we're discussing here, you're bringing a topic to the show today, which I'm super excited about because it's never been discussed in this structure before, and that is, universal design and understanding it.
Yeah.
So I guess for listeners new to the concept, how would you define universal design, Don?
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of background, and then I'll kind of also, I will absolutely kind of give you what my definition of it and how I think about it. But if you'll notice, my Zoom background is kind of highlighting the 2025 Disability and Conference, which was recently concluded. That this is one of the premier conferences where businesses, people, and everyone gets together to really talk about, advancing persons with disabilities as they think about their careers and as corporations. So, I had the opportunity at this conference to actually talk about universal design on a great panel. And really, when you think about universal design, it's really about having that potential to make daily work and life healthier, more productive, safer, and friendlier for everybody. There is a change of mindset when you start to think about it from a design principle, because you are looking kind of at a process that's going to remove physical, social barriers and really create that truly inclusive environment. As you're doing this and as you're going through this process, you're thinking about, improvements in human performance, health and wellness, safety outcomes, social participation, and then this also then starts to create kind of economic inclusion for people who have typically maybe been excluded from the workforce, who have or haven't thought that they could really go in to your workplace because they were worried about encountering some type of barriers. It is going above and beyond kind of within the US, like ADA compliance for the American Disabilities Act. So it's not, that's just kind of the baseline. This is about talking about taking it up a notch, where you're thinking, not only about physical disabilities, you're thinking about neurodiversity and everything that, someone or you just as a normal person could encounter, because we're all going to experience changes in our ability as we age, and or something could happen, and trying to have that environment where you can come into work and you have a facilities team or a real estate team that's actually thinking about those things beforehand to make your experience in the workplace very productive. We like to talk about it as creating a workplace where anybody can come in and thrive.
Mm. You mentioned removing physical and social barriers. Could you give us some examples, Don, so we can just illustrate for us what that would look like,
Yeah,
feel like?
one of the I think simpler ways to think about this is if you think about product placement on shelving. If you place all of the products, and if you have a multitude of products and you place them horizontally, someone who is in a wheelchair can't get to the top shelf of that product without asking for help. But if you place your products in the vertical, they have the same opportunity to pick all the different selections that I would have, standing tall at 6 feet 5 inches. And I think that to me is like, when people ask me about it, that's the example that I really use, because I think that's kind of what that is, there's nothing stopping you from doing everything horizontally. But it's not inclusive. It's not allowing for that product placement to be used by the widest variety of people that's out there. So that's kind of how I tend to think about it. When you start to think about it in terms of what we're doing from a design perspective and some things there, it really, you're thinking about lighting, you're thinking about carpet transitions and wayfinding, and all these different tools to enable it. But in terms of like, how are you like, it's those little details like the product
Mm.
placement that are what starts to really differentiate how inclusive you've really created the environment. The other one that I'll highlight, because you see this a lot, and I've even seen it in Oracle facilities, I've seen it in Merck facilities, I've seen it in other facilities, is typically when someone comes up to the welcome desk. You'll have the higher desk, and then you'll maybe you'll have something lower because you got to fill out paperwork, do computer work, and you may have something that is more designated for someone who's coming in a wheelchair. It's not uncommon to see books or plants placed there. And no one's intentionally. It's done for, kind of, hey, we want to make things look nicer in our lobby or our reception area. But you've actually created a barrier for somebody. And it's kind of also having that eye for just kind of a detail where, again, it's not anything that you've done intentionally. It's just something that someone hasn't really thought through. And that's the other thing, is that a lot of times you can do this without making a lot of changes. Like the two examples I just gave to you now require no money to change what you're doing. They're more of a mindset shift where, if you're starting to think about curbing, or you're starting to think about sharp objects or edges and other things, or creating quieter space for someone who might need that time to just decompress, there's a capital component to theirs. But a lot of these, you can just kind of look at what you already have and say, okay, how can I make this more welcoming? How can I make it so the largest population can use it, so it's just accessible to everyone? And you start to find that a lot of these things they're not, they're either no cost or very low cost to implement.
Well, great example, by the way, to start with the horizontal and vertical. Like, I don't know that I ever would have thought of that. And you're right. It takes no financial investment other than the time invested to reset the shelving, right? Or the placement of the goods on the shelving, right?
Yeah, because you already got the shelving there. You just got to move the pieces on the shelf around a little bit.
Sure, sure. And I also love how you said it's more of a mindset shift. I want to talk about that a little bit, because so maybe backing up a bit, did you always have this mindset? Where did you start to manifest it? Where'd you learn it? Yeah.
I'd been asked this question a couple of times, and it's honestly, I didn't really start thinking about it until I was probably in Merck. And I was taking over, I think I was taking over just maybe the head of real estate, or there was a function I was taking over. And I got a call from this person named Nora, who worked in human resources. And she was, she worked kind of in the diversity inclusion office at that time. And, she called me to invite me for coffee. To when she then informed me also, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but you're also the one that works with me on the accommodations process. And I'd like to talk to you about some issues and some things that I think we can partner on to make, to improve, to make it easier for people to request an accommodation, to be more timely in how we respond to it, to have, even some training on just some sensitivity and some etiquette and some things out there. And I was kind of like, oh, I didn't realize I had responsibility, but I'm like, oh yeah, let's absolutely talk. At the same time, there was an overall assessment going on in Merck on Merck's overall, just, looking at security, looking at our IT, looking at everything and how accessible it was. And through that, I started to meet some consultants and some others who are kind of working. And I honestly started to, one of the things that I kind of believe in, and I think this is something, again, if I were just to say, I think everyone should look for this, and what they do is, what are ways where you can make a contribution that has a really positive impact on people's lives in your job. And I started thinking about that. I'm like, whoa, from a facilities real estate perspective, this is huge. This is like, without us actually going out and doing volunteer work, which is all great, and you can do all those things in there, great. Here's something that we can actually do inside of our organization to create an environment where everyone can come in and feel like they can thrive, as I mentioned earlier. And it was missing. It wasn't, again, not because wasn't, malicious or anything. It was just something that none of us had really ever thought about. And so for me, I just started, it's kind of one of those things. Once it just started building from there. this opportunity to really kind of think about how we design and how we build facilities and how we operate our facilities so they are truly accessible for everyone. And we're not perfect. I'm not gonna, like, listen, there are things we see every day that we thought we had it, and then we learn something and someone points something out. So, it's a continuous improvement journey that we'll always be on. But, I credit Nora. She was the one who really got me started. She started introducing me to people. She started seeing that I was getting excited, and we started talking about stuff. And then eventually she asked me to lead the employee resource group at Merck for people who have a disability. And that then introduced me to like Disability In and these other things where I started to be getting to get more active in terms of just, overall my participation in different events and, even, starting to talk to, businesses that are owned by a person with disability, working with disability, and has this next gen leader program where they have kids who are in college who have a disability and they want to connect them with business leaders for mentorship and things like that. So it just, it's kind of one of those things that just kept growing and growing from there. But that's how it started with a very simple coffee meeting to inform me that I was now, a partner with her in terms of improving the accessibility at Merck in terms of just our accommodations process at that time.
Look at the impact that Nora, you said Nora, right?
Yep, Nora. Yeah,
Nora had through you, and
yeah,
God knows how many other people it's touched at this point. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah. And again, coming right back to the whole people that we started off with, because it was me and her meeting for coffee.
I'm hearing an intentional mindset and focus that you began to put onto this instead of, hey, this is broken or it's missing or it's not there. No, we're paying attention to it more.
Yeah. So when you think about there's a bunch of principles. And I will tell everyone this is all, when I started down this road, this was not as accessible on the internet as it is now. If you go onto the internet and you type in facilities management, universal design, or any number of keywords, you will get a ton of information on how to do this and what it means. But essentially, there are about 7 key principles in universal design. The first one being equitable use, which is the design is useful to people with, a wide ranging of diverse abilities. Flexibility is the second principle. It accommodates a wide range of individual preferences and abilities. It should be simple and intuitive. You want everyone to be able to use whatever kind of we're talking about or access what we're talking. So it's easy to understand, regardless of a user's experience, knowledge, language skills. Information is perceptible. So you've thought about the communication of what it is you're trying to show. It's effective. It can be, it's intuitive to the user regardless of the condition or their sensory abilities. It's also designed, to minimize hazards. Obviously, you don't, and this honestly is just a good environmental health and safety practice when you're designing your workplace. You don't want people to get hurt at work, and so that's obviously also goes into this. Low physical effort. The design can be used efficiently and comfortably by anybody with minimal fatigue. And the last one is you do need to think about size and space. You need to have the appropriate size and space based on approach, reach, use, regardless of a person's body size, posture, or their mobility. And if you could, as you kind of think it from an architect, or if you're working with your designers and things and you start to build these principles in. I've been lucky in my career to have worked with 2 people, one named Andrew Houghton, who leads Disability Inclusion Solutions, and Mike Perry of Progressive AE, who are both kind of early mentors for me and consultants that I worked with to really kind of learn what this means. They've done audits for me both at Merck and at Oracle to help me build these programs. But as I started going into this and learning about it, what I realized is I said, well, we don't want to build facilities and then run around afterwards and say, oh my God, now we got to change everything because we didn't think about these things.
Sure.
That's how you waste money. at the end of the day. So building universal design principles and into the design standards is actually, from my perspective, the goal within how I do this from a project perspective or even a facilities management real estate is I want every project to have this already built in. So when we're doing, when continuous improvement opportunities come up, they're not wholesale changes. There may be little modifications because the facilities have already been designed and built to this new specification that we're looking for. And I don't have the statistics on this, but honestly, I have not seen a case yet where if we incorporated these early in the design that it was causing costs to go up 25% or anything. A lot of these things are just simple, intuitive things that if you do them right up in the design process, they're not driving any element of cost in your project. I mean, it's still furniture, it's still carpeting, it's still lighting. It's not anything that's going to significantly impact what you're doing from your project budget. The flip side to that, though, is if you miss things, then yeah, you could have significant cost structures if you don't think about egress, if you don't think about how people are coming into your facility, you could have to change things that you did wrong at the security gate or things that you did wrong at the front door. Those are where the costs can start to add up. The other thing that my team talk about is obviously we know we can't do everything. Like when we do build a facility or we have an existing facility, we have an audit, we have a checklist of things when we'll do universal design assessments that kind of tell us what to look for. And from anywhere from the cafeteria example, the food placement I gave you, to how people enter the facility, to car park, to, mobility around the facility, to mobility within the facility. We have to prioritize improvements. I mean, there is we all have the reality of capital budgets. We all have all of those things that we need to think through. We obviously look to do the low cost, no cost items right away, just knock those out. No reason to have them lingering, no reason to have a large project tracking list for them, just get them done, do it. And then the other things we have to slowly build into our capital plans. Or if it's something that we know we're not going to be able to fix, okay, what's the next best alternative that the team can think about? But I think the long-term goal, when you kind of really want to go down this type of design kind of philosophy, is it's to build it into your design standards. So it is the way you do business, and it's not a, hey, I'm going to do universal design. It's standard. It's how we do our business. Of course we do universal design. Why wouldn't we?
Well, that you just led me into my next question. Where does it begin? It sounds like it begins at the design phase and the architecture of the building, right? And my question about that is, how versed are architects and designers, or do you have to lead them along?
Yeah. So I would say when I started doing this, I'm a decade in to my involvement here. It was a handful of people that knew this. You were, like I said, I was lucky. I got together with one architectural company that was already thinking about this. And that was Mike's organization. And then I mentioned Andrew, who was a consultant, who was heavily involved in this. What we started to do as we built it into our design standards is we actually bring our strategic partners in with us. So that would be the architects, that would be the construction teams and everything. So we actually started training folks on how to do it. Now I think like I said, as I mentioned, there is a lot more information out there on there that now there are a lot more companies that kind of get this and they're already incorporating it. But, we did make a conscious choice to share this. It's not anything that's a Oracle secret or anything. It was a Merck secret. So we shared what we were doing. Honestly, we'll share stuff if someone, like when I was doing this conference, I told anyone, listen, if you have questions or you want to talk about this or you want to see how we're doing something, send me an email, look me up on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to connect you to kind of my person who oversees the program. We'll be happy to share, how we do the assessments, how we think about, writing things up. How we conduct the tours, how we prioritize what we can do and what we can't do.
Mhm.
But like I said, it's become a lot easier now to do this because it's become more, it's not, it's not fully mainstream yet, but there's a lot more people who have awareness of it, especially in the architectural world and kind of the project delivery world. And a lot of that is because we have been very purposeful about training and teaching and showing people this is what we need, in terms of how our design standards need to be met if you want to kind of work for us. It's in our request for proposals when we go out to market. This is
Mhm.
what people are now seeing. Again, it's more of a way of working now to some degree because it's just, this is what you have to build to.
Yeah, I love the generous factor that you're conveying too, because and that's why I'm so glad you're here on the show because our community is looking for ideas, right? The listeners are largely people like you, right, in a role
Yep.
similar to yours, and what you're sharing could be very helpful, and I'm sure already is just hearing it. So you probably expect to hear from some people after the show.
Yep.
You mentioned an audit checklist, and is this like I'm wondering how much time and energy it takes your department. I mean, you've got what like global real estate facilities, the H&S. You have a lot going on, a lot you're responsible for. Who designs these checklists, and yeah, can you speak about
Yeah.
some of
So,
that?
this is a question that I will routinely get, and I answer this question in two different ways. There are advantages to working for a large multinational corporation. I mentioned two consulting groups that I was able to work with to literally go to them and say, "Hey, please help me build this." Um, so that was very helpful. It allowed us to
Got
move
it.
very fast. But there's also the part of this that if you're a small or a medium-sized business out there are a ton of resources out there like myself and others who would be happy to help get you set up and kind of share what we're doing. There's a multitude of internet searches that you can now do to kind of also get that same information if you don't have the ability to really go out and partner with kind of a consultant who specializes in this. And honestly, I think this is with AI and some of the other things that are starting to come up, you're probably going to see some companies that are building mobile tools or tools,
Mm.
from an app perspective or something that's probably also going to be available out there for you where you can almost just download it and it'll give you the checklist and kind of here are the things that you should be looking for, depending on what your facility is. The other part of that is there is a difference between kind of, you leasing, a half a floor or one floor on an 18-story building versus you own your own campus. So there is a landlord component of this where, there might be things about the building that you just don't have control over. And you have to wrestle with that, and that's part of your leasing potential strategy. Where when you own the campus, you obviously have full control over kind of what you've built and what you've done. So, there are always nuanced differences to those types of questions, just depending on your circumstances. But like I said, I think there is a way to learn and figure out how to do this, regardless of the size of your company.
Hey, rock stars. If you're tuning into the podcast and are feeling overwhelmed by all the maintenance demands at your facility, don't stress. We've got you covered. Our sponsor, Coludis, is your go-to partner to help you tackle all those demands and get them done right, on time, and with top-notch quality. From project planning to execution, Coludis is there to make hard work easy. Visit coludis.com today to get started.
Thank you, Don. And does it all start with the 7 key principles that you?
It starts with learning about those 7 key principles, and then, ultimately it's like, you educate yourself and then you get your check and then like either you do your own tour or if you're partnering with someone, you go out and you tour a facility and you generate the list and you kind of you learn real quick, where you're good and where you're missing the boat.
Mm.
That example I gave of the flowers on the desk in the reception area. It's a humbling experience to be touring your facility with someone in a wheelchair and watch them row up to that and kind of look at you and say, "How am I supposed to use this?"
Mm. Right back to the mindset.
it's a learn by doing process. It really is. I mean, this is one of those things where you need to get out there and you need to, it really is observation. It's walking around. It's putting, it's thinking about things not from your perspective, but from others, from another person's perspective. For those companies that have employee resource groups, if you have one that is focused, that has a focus on person with disabilities, ask someone from that group to walk around with you and tell you how they struggle with your facilities. They're not shy, and they'll give you a lot of great details on, hey, could you do something here, or could you do something here, or here's something that would make my life easier, in terms of accessing our facilities and using them and being productive and, really enjoying my experience there. That's another avenue to like, again, you can do that without doing any internet research on any of the things we're talking here. That's just go ask a colleague, who
Excellent idea.
who
Yeah.
is maybe part of that employee resource group, who they're going to give you some great insights that you can just get started on right away without doing any of this other stuff. The other stuff gets a little bit more involved because now you're talking about wanting to change your design standards. So you got to make sure you really do have that right. You understand what you're doing. But if you're just looking to get some real good information so you can just start creating a list to work off of, people are your best option. They'll tell you where you can improve.
And like you said, they won't be shy.
They will not
point
be
out
shy.
everything. Yeah.
No, they'll be, and a lot of them on it, and I'll be honest, a lot of them will be thrilled that you're asking. Be prepared for them to say, someone asked me about this 3 or 4 years ago and no one did anything. So the follow up and the demonstration in this program, I think it's honestly more important than, like, if you get a list of 3 things and you do all 3 of them, that's success. Don't set yourself up for failure by trying to get a list of 40 things when you can only get 3 of them done. I mean, you gotta, kind of set yourself up for success here and get the small victories that you can build momentum with.
That's good advice. Very good advice. I want to jump back onto earlier in our discussion. You mentioned that, I believe you mentioned that it goes above and beyond ADA requirements.
Yep.
Could you, and I know you've probably given a couple of examples, but you kind of summarize, like, what do you really mean by that?
It's thinking about, like, lighting and how do you change lighting so someone knows maybe they're entering a different section of the facility if they have some sight issues. Transitions from, like, hardwood floor to carpeting so that it's smooth and easy, but it's also, it's not going to create a tripping hazard, but it's also recognizable to someone. Got to give a lot of thought about wayfinding and, how can people navigate through your facility and things like that. I'll be honest, one of the ones that I'm really trying to think through and that I get a lot of feedback on is elevators, and how accessible are elevators, and are there other things that we can be doing to improve the sound when an elevator arrives. If you have an elevator of 6 banks, can the person easily find which elevator just came? Can they easily figure out what floor they're going to get to? Is the door closing so fast that by the time they get there, they're, almost then doing something unsafe by trying to stick their hand or their foot into the elevator to reopen it? So those are some of the things that I, like I said, the elevators we have, they all meet ADA compliance requirements. There's very set specific rules and things that you have to have for your elevators. But they're not necessarily easily used by everybody. And now again, that involves partnering with elevator companies and kind of seeing what they're doing from a technology standpoint. There is a capital component to that, obviously, especially now when you're starting to talk about retrofit. But again, if you kind of get it to your design principles and your standards, you can think about those things up front.
So this is a great example too. Very good examples today, Don. So with the elevators, so ADA would require what? Ramp accessibility, right? Size, accessibility.
Yeah.
But what I hear you saying is more, are you saying visual cues? Like, could you find out of a
visual cues, hearing cues,
Yep.
length of time that the doors are staying open.
Sure. Yeah.
It doesn't, and again, I couldn't tell you what the standard time is, but what's wrong with keeping the door open, an extra 5 or 10 seconds? Now I know all of us who are in the elevator would be hitting that button real quick to try to close it. But, those are the things that, I start to think through, and as I just think about it, just, overall accessibility and usability by everybody. What are those things that you can do to just kind of make it more simple, more intuitive, more flexible? And then obviously the equitable part of it being the first consideration when you're in these types of programs.
Yeah, and it sounds like it would help all users, not just those with disabilities.
Well, listen,
experience for everyone.
I've been in lobbies and things that, where I got elevators in front of me and elevators in back of me, and I'm not sure which one's coming. And, and if it's allowed and it pings, maybe I heard the ping, maybe I didn't hear the ping. And then all of a sudden I'm the one who's trying to put my hand in the elevator and thinking that's, as the head of environmental health and safety, I shouldn't be putting my hand in that elevator. So let's just wait for the next one.
Would you say that universal design improves human performance and wellness?
I believe it does. Yes. It's there, there's a mental side to that if you're coming into a facility where you feel welcome, that is energizing for you. Not to mention being around your colleagues and all of those things, which I think, is also critical to all of those elements. But I do believe that is an area where, there's air quality and there's all the things that facilities can do from cleanliness and all of those things that are going to obviously be incorporated into your facility design. But I absolutely believe, creating a facility based on universal design principles where your kind of true north is, it is going to be a truly inclusive environment where you can bring your full self to work and thrive. There, I believe, are huge mental health benefits to that for a person. Not to mention now, their ability to kind of get out and, interact across the entirety of your facility, maybe not just their work area. This is the entirety of the facility they now have access to. Now, obviously, this is getting in more into a campus environment versus kind of that single office building or that floor in a tower. But if you have a large campus, imagine having that truly accessible campus where anyone can be inside, outside, the cafeterias, the cafe, the quieter spaces. They have full equal access, like as everybody does.
Awesome. Outstanding. You mentioned you learned this at Merck. Did you introduce it to Oracle?
Yes, I brought it into Oracle. It was one of the first things I did when I came in. Listen, I asked about it. I said, hey, are you guys doing this? Have you heard about it? Have you thought about it? And the answer was no. And I said, cool. Let's sit down and talk about it, because this is something that, I think is, again, I think there's a power to this for people in facilities management to really get energized around kind of what you're doing and how you can have an impact on a person's life. And their ability to be successful at work. So, I got a small core group of people together in Oracle. I did, again, I took advantage of being a large multinational company. I introduced them to Andy. I introduced them to Mike and said, please help us build this. But at this point, there was a lot of information that was on the internet. So where in my Merck days, I was totally at the, hey, you need to educate me. I was also now able to introduce them to people while also sending them articles and other presentations that I had given in the past to say, this is what I'm talking about. And it was also a lot easier to kind of chart, hey, when we do this, it's going to look like this to this, and eventually we want to get to, the implementation into our design standards. And I would say, listen, I think from an Oracle perspective, we're still in the process of really incorporating it into our design standards. I still think there's some work that we need to kind of do there, and we're working through that to make those changes. For those of you who are following the news, Oracle is going to be building a new corporate campus in Nashville, Tennessee. We are absolutely working with our architects and kind of the project team on full implementation of the universal design standards that we have written. I think we're going to learn a lot about what we got right and what we got wrong, which is great. That's continuous improvement. That's learning. That's,
Sure.
these are not things that you're just going to get right off the bat, and they're not things that are just stagnant. And one way of doing things may look very different a year or 2 years, especially with kind of how AI is really starting to, kind of change how some of these things can be done and how quickly you can iterate things. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what that's going to look like, and, kind of how we end. But, it's a journey. It's a continuous improvement journey. You start, and then you just keep chugging along, and you look for those, you celebrate the wins when you get them. And, when you do find that you have an issue, you move quickly to get it corrected.
It's exciting, very exciting time for Oracle right now, and you and your team, I would say, brand new corporate
Yes.
campus. That's
Yes,
no,
it's gonna,
no
yeah,
small
it'll be
undertaking.
exciting. I mean, I listen, I think like probably like the majority of the multinationals and everyone who has a lot of space, we all continue to, you have different companies doing very different things in terms of how they're returning people back to the office, or how people are back in the office. I don't think we're really returning anyone anymore. It's really, people have kind of settled into how they're working. And so, within Oracle, we have that, we continue to have that blend of offices that are well utilized. That's great. We have the blend of offices that are not well utilized, and we're looking at the strategies to kind of, think about what does that mean, and how do we address that from a cost perspective. And then, we have
Sure.
kind of the exciting kind of growth projects like Nashville, where we do have an opportunity to kind of see something come from the ground up.
Can't wait to see how it develops for you. We could probably go on for another hour about this particular topic, but I do want to make time here, Dawn, for mentoring and career development. I know that's another passion of yours, and you mentioned a
Yes.
mentor you had and learned about, not the importance of people, right, earlier on. Could you
Yep.
talk about, mentoring from your perspective?
Yeah, again, as I think about my career, there were a lot of people at various stages who, as you get to reflect and kind of, I've been doing this now for 30 some years. There are a lot of people that, have kind of given me advice, given me guidance and things like that. And it's kind of one of the things that I really started to enjoy doing. Especially with kind of like, I love to talk to people who are mid-career or even early in their career, but especially with a lot of the college students. It was something, back in 1994 when I was in school, 1993, I did not have a lot of access to, people who had been working 20 or 30 years. And so I'm really kind of enjoying having, there's an energizing part to that when you're talking to someone who's kind of just getting started and they're all excited and they're nervous, and you start to remember how you felt then. But I find it just very enriching to kind of spend time talking to them about my career journey and the different decisions I made. And I'll get questions from like, how did you end up in facilities management and real estate? And then I'll tell them all that I'm a chemical engineer. And then they're all kind of like, wait, how are you a chemical engineer doing facilities and real estate? What does that have to do with your degree? And then I can talk to them about kind of, well, here, understand something. Yes, when I first started my career, I was absolutely in chemical engineering, working for Stepan and doing those things. They were a specialty chemical manufacturing company. But as my career progressed and as I was looking for new opportunities, that led me to Merck, where they were starting up a real estate and facilities management organization. And what they asked me to do when I joined Merck was more on the process improvement, continuous improvement side of things. And then, I kind of built a career from there, not more focused in on the chemical side of it, but still using engineering principles and good principles of just leadership and other things. But, I switched. I was now all of a sudden I'm in a facilities and real estate environment. And then as a development opportunity, for my own personal growth, I had an opportunity to run corporate real estate for Merck. And I put my hand up and I said, absolutely. And that then kind of put me in a position to eventually lead Merck's global, real estate and facilities management organization, which then, ultimately led to the current opportunity I have at Oracle. So it creates this great opportunity just to kind of talk about my career arc and journey with people who, in some cases, are questioning, am I studying the right thing in college? And I'm like, well, if you would have told, 22-year-old me that I'm going to be in real estate and facilities, first of all, that profession didn't even really exist like it does today back then. It was out there, but not as, you didn't have like, large multinational companies with people who had my type of role like you do today. JLL and CBRE, they were certainly around, but they were just kind of in the infancy of their facilities things. They were the big real estate companies. So you just don't know how things are gonna change. And again, it allows me to really start talking about that networking and the people as you go through your career. The other thing I do kind of tell students is, not only do you want to find mentors, but you also want to be a mentor. Some of the best things I've learned about being a mentor have come through my participation in the Disability and Next Gen Leadership Mentoring Program, where, these students who have a disability are, they're impacting me and teaching me things about their lives and how, the struggles they have or the opportunities they have or where they need help, or, even a chance for me to bounce ideas off of them about programs I'm thinking about. So here's, there's a situation where I'm a mentor, but I'm also learning
I
as I'm
love that you
doing it.
just pointed
So
that out, because
yeah, so I
that's just
think that's
continuous
important
learning.
for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. And that's the other thing is, that whole concept of just being able to tell people, listen, I've worked in, I think 3 different companies. There are a couple of things that have been very true across all of those companies. Continuous improvement. Everyone's looking for people who can drive continuous improvement. They're looking for people who can thrive and lead change management. There's this concept that I like to call service mindset and enterprise leadership, which is really more internal within your organizations. How do you think about what your role in the company is and how does it impact the larger organization, so you can really come up with your goals and objectives knowing they're supporting the larger corporation. Those principles have been true across 3 different companies and 3 different industries for me. Whether I was at Stepan to Merck to Oracle, I've applied those principles in kind of the leadership in the organization across all the roles that I had. And the final thing that I really just kind of like to talk to them about is really this concept of planning for your future, thinking about your 2 to 5 year plan and even your 5 year plan above. Like I said, as I said earlier, I would have never envisioned chemical engineer becoming, head of real estate and facilities. And I did a really poor job of kind of managing my career and planning my career probably for the first 10 to 12 years, because I was kind of in this mindset, well, I'm always just going to work in the chemical industry. And, now all of a sudden I'm kind of in the pharmaceutical industry and I'm not doing chemical engineering. And it kind of was a nice kind of part where I had to step back and say, wait, I need to take a little bit more ownership in thinking about this and understanding what my career paths might be and what are those opportunities, such as taking the head of real estate, that then can set you up, for that next step, if that's what you're looking for in your career.
Really, really, really good advice. It's so nice to hear that it's with like an atypical path to the role you're in today. We've heard it several times on the show, and we've seen it multiple times. It's always good to hear that story, and I find it reinforcing for myself, our listeners, to hear, because it's not just a straight line.
No.
You get all different experiences, and you grow from each and every one of them.
Yeah,
And you
and
learn.
that message becomes very, like I said, I've been in numerous conversations with kids who are in college who are worried about, does this degree make sense? They all hear the stuff that, AI is going to replace everyone's job. None of us are going to. Yeah, and I tell them, I said, you know what? It's the same thing I was hearing when I was in college too, when computers were just coming on, when email was really just becoming a thing, and computers were really starting to be, to get more prevalent. Everyone was talking about how they're going to take everything. And, there are jobs that don't exist today that, did, but there are other jobs that didn't exist that are now going to exist. And it's not going to be a straight line for you. And, but that's where like that whole learning mindset and kind of being mindful of those things, don't hide from it, embrace it, understand that, there's going to be change. But if
100%.
you're thoughtful about it and you can still chart a course within that change to kind of, help you navigate and move through it.
So you've given countless tips already. I'm still going to ask this question though. What advice would you give, say someone in a role similar to you? Like, what would you share with them?
What I would share is, um, there is still, there is a huge impact that real estate and facilities can have on kind of helping the business be successful. I think, in the years since COVID, there's been just a ton of talk about too much space, reduce the size of the space. Like all of us are talking about that. And I think the thing that we should start, the thing that we need to talk about, and I'll be honest, I probably need to do a better job of this too, is talking about how are we helping the business be successful through the facilities that we are delivering, and what are those connection points, and how can we do that better than what we're doing today, so that for the population that is coming in and is using the facilities. Listen, there are always going to be remote workers now. That's not going away, but there are times and there are needs for people to be in the office, and continuing to shift the conversation towards what are those things that are critical, that are really going to highlight, whether it's your corporate branding, whether it's your coffee food services, whether it's the what your lobby presents when or the types of workspaces. I think there's a ton of things out there about how that we can have that conversation about how we're enabling the business to be successful, and kind of pivoting away from just yeah, we got to downsize the facility because it only has 30% utilization. Okay, that's pretty simple. That's a math equation, lease negotiation, downsize, and you just go off. And I think, it's kind of dominated a lot of the conversations. And shifting it away from there, to me, I think is, kind of the advice priority that I would to give to answer that question.
Yeah, excellent advice. Yeah, I love how do you help the business be successful versus simply running the business and the buildings themselves, right?
Yep.
Um, Outstanding. Like we could go on. I could keep going here. I want to flip it a little bit because you've given us so much already, Don. What about outside of Oracle? How do you spend your time? What do you enjoy?
Yeah, yeah. So, listen, I still, I played football at Bucknell. I'm not doing any flag football or any of those things. I don't need any of those types of injuries, but I still enjoy kind of heading to the gym and doing all of kind of the workouts and the things that, I kind of grew up doing, as an athlete. I'm a big fan of kind of the science fiction horror novel genre, and trying to kind of just see what's out there, all the way from the classics. You could go all the way to kind of like Frankenstein, to even things that are still being written by Stephen King and things like that. So just kind of that wide variety of reading, to kind of just relax and take my mind off of things.
That's awesome. I love. What position in football?
I was an offensive tackle in college.
Excellent. Excellent. Good for you. Well, how would people get in touch with you? Because this on the show, many times you'll have people reach out afterwards because of your knowledge, right? And
Yeah,
shared knowledge.
honestly, if anyone wants to reach out to me, please look me up on LinkedIn. Honestly, if you go in there and just do a search, Don Watson Oracle, should pop up within the search.
Beautiful.
That is kind of what I tell people is the best way to just kind of reach out and get in touch with me. And like I said, if anyone is out there and they really do want to learn more about universal design or how they get started, not only am I happy, I'm more than happy to kind of have that discussion. I'm also happy to connect you with people in my organization who can share our story. And if you want to if you're already on that journey and you want to benchmark, I'm more than happy to do benchmarking too, because that's how we can figure out what we could be doing better, while also sharing kind of the things that we're seeing that work.
Super helpful. Don, I cannot thank you enough for the investment of your time and your knowledge and your experience with all of us today. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been great. Had a great time. Thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you for everyone listening. If you learned something from Don's content, if you like the show, share it with somebody else. Follow us on facilityrockstars.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Don, thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. Great episode of Facility Rockstars. We will see everyone again next week.
It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Colutus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.